Welcome to the inner structure of the musician. My name is Octavio Salas, and today will be the first chapter of many to come with my talented friends from around the world and superb musicians. Today I had a conversation with Sofie Ball, which is an amazing musician, composer, engineer, producer, manager, and also a great guitar player. Also, he have this amazing project named Tiny Orchestral Moments, in which superb and crazy musicians are part of it. If you want to check about Steve, his music, and also this amazing project, I leave you some links on the description. Hope you enjoy.
Hola, Octavio. So great to see you.
Yes, you too, my friend. How are you?
I am in the middle of the middle of a middle in the fall of 2021, just working through the middle. And COVID feels like it's not quite complete. So I'm looking forward to a little break and some holidays coming up to just rest a little bit before blasting through the middle of the middle of the middle.
Hmm, sounds good.
Mm-hmm. And you?
I'm fine, really good.
Mm-hmm.
Passing this pandemic in my house,
Yeah.
like
Awesome.
everyone, or mostly.
And you've got
Anyways,
some good background images to help you with the pandemic mood, I see.
yes, I have Tool here, I have King Crimson,
Mm,
some Toya and Robert, and
mm, awesome.
more stuff here, some guitar craft, and more stuff.
Excellent.
So tell me, I think I never asked you before,
Hmm.
um, how you start in music, how that happened.
Ah, good question. I haven't thought about this for a long time, but both of my parents were very musical and they always sang in choirs, and my mom played piano. So we always had a piano in our house. And I think the earliest thing I remember is my mom used to play the um, introduction to the musical Oklahoma, um, like all this fancy two-handed kind of crazy musical kinds of music when I was little. And then we had, of course, music in the house too. My dad, I think, bought, I can't remember what year it was. It must have been early 70s. But I remember one of the first musical experiences that I remember was hearing Jesus Christ Superstar, the original Broadway cast, with Heaven on Their Minds, that first guitar lick in Seven. And that was a really great, bad first influence. And then my mom and dad also had albums like the New Christie Minstrels. Have you ever heard of that group?
No, I
It's
haven't.
like a massive, it was like Tiny Orchestral Moments from 1971 or something.
Hmm.
And so we always had music in our house. And then I was always interested in music, and I took piano lessons from Mrs. DeLabel, where I grew up in DeKalb, Illinois.
Hmm.
She was, the neighbor piano teacher from down the street. And so I did piano lessons for maybe 4 or 5 years when I was a little kid, just, the typical barely learning kinds of funky, weird little piano lessons. And I switched to violin in middle school. Um, my One of my close friends, Kurt Kummerfeld, and his mom, Barbara Kummerfeld, were in the orchestra, and I think she, I think she had the influence that said, "Oh, you should play violin." So I played violin for a couple of years in middle school,
Hmm.
and then by the time I got to high school, I somehow hypnotized my mom, and she bought me an electric guitar. I think I was 12 or 13.
Hmm.
So I had this hollow body electric guitar, and I went down to the local music store and took guitar lessons for a couple of years. Also horrible, learning like, oh, um, Proud Mary, I think, is some song I learned. Do you know this song by, it's like some
Mm-hmm.
Creedence Clearwater song.
Mm-hmm.
And, bar chords were so hard, like, ouch, E,
The F.
F, oh my God. Yeah, really horrible.
Hmm.
So I had a lot of different instruments and influences. And then I sang in choir, my church choir also, from like probably the time I was 13 or 14 all the way through, high school. And I was in high school choir and I was in a bunch of musicals and in high school as well. Even the year after high school, I was in Godspell,
Hmm.
playing a famous part. You might have heard of it. But I had a lot of fun with music. And one of my best friends, Brett Hamilton, who now runs the Steve Ball fan club, who I think you're friends with him.
Yes.
Um, he introduced me to so many amazing musicians and so much great music when I was in high school. He's the first person who ever played Robert Fripp for me, and I think it was probably exposure, and there was probably a little bit of. I remember seeing the album cover to Red, and my friend John Hogland, I think I was 12, loaned me the album Relayer. So I heard Yes when I was 12, and I was like, what is this? So I had a bunch of musical influences growing up. But probably the most impactful influence was I was in school. I went to University of Illinois in Champaign-Urbana, and I turned on the school radio station where I was also a DJ. But I turned on the school radio station one night and I heard this music that I'd never heard before, and it was Discipline. And had no idea what it was, and it was just like opening my brain up to a new world. And so I heard and did a little research and heard on the radio that King Crimson was coming to someplace 4 hours away from where I was going to school.
Mhm.
And so I think it was about a week later, maybe a couple weeks later, I drove for 4 hours with some friends to Southern Illinois University in Carbondale, Illinois, and it was a Wednesday night. And my friend Brett Hamilton had gotten tickets, and I went to see King Crimson, the Discipline Tour. And there was an opening act called Entropic, a local Illinois ambient band. And then King Crimson came out, this big, beautiful red curtain in an all red auditorium, fairly small auditorium. And they began from silence and they just began playing Discipline. First song, Cold, right out of the gate, super
Hmm.
fast. It was just like, what is this? So I feel like my life turned left on that day. So there's some early history.
Hmm. That's nice.
Does that sound similar to your
No.
experience as a kid?
No. Mine was kind of different. It was like the first time I took a guitar, it was at the age of 8.
Pretty young.
Yes, and the funny story that it was because of a theatrical playing that is
Huh.
happening in my school, and suddenly my teacher told us like, you need to learn to play guitar. But I only took 3 lessons of guitar playing, basic chords,
Hmm.
C, D, and G,
Hmm.
maybe
Hmm.
an A lost
Okay.
in there.
Yeah.
And well, for 3 class, no kids can play like Jose Triani after 3 classes. So
Probably not, especially with, C, D sus4.
so
Yeah.
so for me it was like, yes, I am doing my best, and my teacher told me like, oh, you play awful.
Oh, that's good encouragement. Thank you, teacher. Seriously, you play awful. Okay.
Yes, and
Did
well,
you go back to that teacher after that incredible encouragement?
no, I don't know what happened to her, but
Hmm.
after that, I remember that I quit the guitar.
Oh, shocking.
Yes, and later on my 15 years old, I begin again to play guitar.
Okay. What
15,
inspired you when you were 15?
I don't know, maybe it was like something that was calling me. Like
Hmm.
I saw a neighbor playing guitar and I said like I remember that I could play some things on the guitar. So
Mm-hmm.
he told me like, "Oh, you want to relearn? Oh, I can teach you. You play here, 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 and the rhythmic. Well, that's your problem."
Okay.
And for me, it was like, mm, okay, that will be fun to do it in my house without a guitar.
Hmm.
So
Okay.
that began to develop, and my friends, also my neighbor friends,
Hmm.
um, begin to play also. So it was like all the kids in the neighbor
Hmm.
started to play.
Hmm.
So that was a beginning, and then after I discovered many bands and I saw them play, and I was like, wow, I want to be like him when I grow up.
Hmm.
So that mostly moved me like to play more and more and more.
Mm-hmm.
And then it finished like a professional career. So here I am.
Okay. That was a
Yes.
pretty fast history. Was there one guitarist though who inspired you? Who said, "Oh, I really want to learn because I heard this guitar player and that was really."
As a musician, I think it was, well, when I began to listen more stuff when I was playing, it was James Hetfield
Oh,
from
okay.
Metallica. It's
Yeah.
just a really strange because mostly of the people I know, they wanted to be Kirk Hammett on the early days, like playing
Hmm.
super fast solo, and
Hmm.
I only felt inspired by James Hetfield, you know,
Yeah.
like cool
Interesting.
riffs, and he could
Mm-hmm.
sing, and for me it was like, oh, that
Hmm.
looks cool. I want to do that.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And years later, well, it came to me like for the first time Dream Theater, and for me
Hmm.
it was like, wow, I
Yeah.
want to play like that. It
Hmm.
sounds amazing. And then I
Mm-hmm.
start to get more deep into John Petrucci's world, and
Hmm.
it was maybe he was like the musician that helped me to make my decision to be a professional.
Hmm.
So on
And
those
just from
moments,
influence, was it just the guitar influence? Because in a way, Dream Theater seems to have influenced a whole like generation of musicians too. But I wonder if it was it the music more or the musicians.
for me on that moment it was the musician.
Huh.
Even when I liked a lot the music and I wanted to have a band like Dream Theater on that
Uh-huh.
moment,
Yeah.
on that moment it was the musician because I bought the DVD of his instructional and I wanted to
Ah.
play super fast like him and
Okay.
do, you know, crazy John Petrucci stuff and learn a
Hmm.
lot of their songs, and
Yeah.
I was fascinated about that. Even the
Hmm.
music, I liked it a lot because I like it a lot. He
Hmm.
inspired me.
Hmm.
Later, it became like, you know, this curiosity of creating a band.
Hmm. Okay.
That was kind of different.
I think I remember seeing a picture of you with Jordan Rudess also.
Yes.
Did you meet Jordan somewhere? Because I met him probably no, I probably met him 8 years ago, also in Seattle. But how
Mm-hmm.
did you meet?
It was here in Mexico. He
Okay.
came to give a Seaboard Rise, you know, the keyboard
Mm-hmm.
master class. He explained a
Ah,
lot
yeah.
of that keyboard, and he also played a lot of stuff. Not only Dream Theater, a lot of stuff.
Oh, yeah. He's incredible.
It was brilliant to hear him,
Mm-hmm.
and honestly, he's one of my favorite musicians.
Yeah.
It's brilliant. It's the way that he plays is kind of
Yeah.
brilliant, and well, the photos were like the sign moments, you know, and
Ah, okay.
and it well, the funny part was that I came to him and I say to him like, this is going to sound a little bit strange,
Hmm.
but I am not trying to do anything else. I only want to say something. And
Hmm.
he was like, you know, this face like, what the hell is going to say this guy? and and I turn to him and I say, I love you, man.
Ah, awesome.
So we start. He only looked at me and he said like, well, today you can say anything you want, and we start to laugh. It was a
Okay, good.
really cool moment with him. So
Awesome.
so yeah, that moment was like really really special for me. It
Hmm.
was really really cool. The music for me, that moment that I can live right now is the
Hmm.
music.
Yeah, awesome.
And for you, how was it?
You mean with Dream Theater slash Jordan Rudess?
Yes.
Oh, I was working at Microsoft on this music project called Surface Music Kit. I think I have one. I think I showed you, or maybe I was working on this, and it was sort of a
Mm,
keyboard that you plug into a Surface. It snaps in
mhm,
magnetically, and then it's designed to let you essentially do remixes because it automatically changes key and reharmonizes things, and it essentially lets you combine multiple stems and then have them work together automatically with the same rhythm and the same harmony.
mm,
So he came to, I think he came to Microsoft somehow through that project, and then we went out to dinner with some friends. And he was also working on some apps at the time, so he showed some very cool iPad apps. I don't know if you've ever played with his iPad apps, but he's got some very cool apps that do amazing
yes.
glissando, mode-driven kind of soloing and great timbres. Like you can use the Y-axis to change timbre
Hmm.
dynamically. Just amazing app. So I was always a fan of his dexterity and
Mm.
his creativity, some of his improvisations, and then some of the funny things he does. Just setting a camera on the piano. I'm still in awe of his raw musicality. But it was maybe 8 years ago or something. I spent a couple years working on this
Mm.
hardware project. And the project itself was canceled.
Mm.
We packaged up, you saw, we made a package, but the device itself was packaged, ready to ship, ready to go. But Surface One, the very first Surface that Microsoft made, had some issues. And so many of the early peripherals for that project were postponed. And
Mm.
then I went and worked on a different project for the last 7 or 8 years. But
Mm.
he was super inspirational and really great guy.
I can imagine that. And I am curious about something, Steve.
Hmm.
What kind of musician do you consider? Do you consider yourself like to be a guitar player? Do you consider to be a composer, arranger, or even,
Hmm.
I don't know, an engineer?
I am probably, I think of myself more as a producer. I can play okay. I'm not great. I can play. Um, and when I practiced piano, like a few years ago, I was playing a lot more piano. Um, but I was never just amazingly great, but I was good enough. And I think it was in the right place at the right time when the League of Crafty Guitarists first kind of entered its first 7 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always been able to combine my skills with just drawing, music, writing, organizing, and I would say even probably my real actual skill is in bringing groups of people together to collaborate on unlikely or in some cases allegedly impossible projects,
Mm.
as you know.
No, I
But
don't.
hmm, but I mean, I'm a guitarist, but I'm not really. Um, like many years ago, like when Guitarcraft first started, I really invested about 14 years, uh, something like, yeah, probably 12 to 14 years, almost just full time, practicing all the time, playing all the time. Um, and I like just dabbled in engineering jobs because I was also an electrical engineer and doing entrepreneurial stuff, and I could always make pretty decent money doing these kind of funny side jobs as an engineer that financed the rest of the year being a musician. So I could work something like 2 or 3 months a year, and then go to Germany or Argentina, or I went on all of the very early Guitarcraft courses. I went on almost every course I could manage to get myself to all over the world. Um, but there was a whole set of us at the time that everything was so new. There was a family of guitarists from that era who would just go to every course, and it was Kurt and Tony, and in those early days. There's some who are still around, still doing work. Jaxie is still super active from
Mm,
kind of those first 7 years.
mm,
Bob Williams, really all of the Seattle Guitar Circle people that included in the early days Dean Jensen, uh, great guy, and Bill Rieflin, um, and probably another 30 to 50 people. John Diaz, Pietro Rossino,
mm,
Nigel, Gavin, Paul Richards, Bert Lams, Hideo Maria. Oh, all of those early guitar crafties. We had such a strong, intense experience, being in some of the early courses and just immersing ourselves, practicing all day, and then being given this incredible gift to live and go on courses, and then take on these tours that were in some cases the source of this early repertoire that came out of nowhere. All of that early Guitarcraft repertoire just was just us mostly playing in hallways and bathrooms between meals and between working on Guitarcraft courses, and it was all so fresh and new
mm,
that you know I think none of us had ever heard anything quite like it. It was just like being around for the birth of a giant, or maybe that's a bad phrase to use, but or sad phrase. Uh, it was like being present for the initiation of something that's still going strong to this day. And then the second phase, Robert sent everyone home. He was having a whole bunch of financial issues, and um, I was working in the Guitarcraft office. It was called Guitarcraft Services. We were scraping by, booking tours, making picks and merchandise and T-shirts, and even back then, aphorisms and posters, and the very first kind of printed Guitarcraft writings that Robert, kind of his early brilliant writings about Guitarcraft. And I think we were in the middle of this 3 year tour. We were supposed to kind of be on tour from 1990 to 1993. And right in the middle, something bad happened with EG Records, and Robert had to shift all of his attention to these lawsuits and to his, you know, kind of financial life. So a bunch of us who were living at Claymont at the time,
mm,
who had moved there, and I think I'd been living there about 3 years at the time, from like 1988 or 1999 until, or sorry, 88 to like 91 and a half. We basically had to shut everything down.
mm,
And so I think there's probably somewhere between 12 and 15 of us living in West Virginia at this place called Claymont Court, where the first Guitarcraft courses were happening. And we packed everything up, sold everything, and moved away. And Robert's essentially his instruction at the time to all of us who were still going strong was to go outside of the safe circle and work on something called application and assimilation.
mm,
And the instruction was to just go find your own voice, make your own make your own way, take what you've learned and make it your own. And so I moved to Boston for about a year, with Karen Thomas, my wife at the time. We were both kind of in the middle of kind of driving all this guitarcraft stuff. She was often our tour manager and just kept things together. Super organized, incredible handwriting, just also an intensely incredible person. But we moved to Boston for about a year and then moved to Seattle in 1993. Mostly because we needed to get out of Boston. And Karen had a sister in Seattle, and I knew two people in Seattle, Bill Rieflin and Bill Van Buren. And so I took a leap and said, well, Bill and Bill are there. Can't be all bad. So we packed up our stuff and moved to Seattle.
That's great. And in all your musical history, what is your worst experience, and how would you manage to get out of it?
Which one?
Choose one if you want. You can share whatever you want.
Maybe I'll just share some highlights of the worst experiences, but here's the thing. In all these musical situations, there's always peaks and crashes. And so you probably know this, Octavio, from, the feeling of going on a course and this like rocking, it's hard, day 3, you're just like sleep deprived and super tired and just practicing like crazy, and you're just like, well, wait, why am I here? And I'm hungry, and that person's annoying me, and I'm sleeping on, I think this is a bed, but it feels like it's a metal plate that might have a piece of burlap on it. And so and then you do the show, and it's like Cordoba, and it's just like all of a sudden these people are throwing notes across the cathedral silently back and forth, and this like peak experience are balanced with really freaking hard personal situations, coming back broke from projects or courses, coming back to a pile of mail, and family or people wondering where you've been and what you're doing, just trying to keep your life together from traveling and also having some kind of stability. So there's always peaks and then these like really low points, and I find that the higher the peak, the lower the low points. So I'll just share super quickly a couple of deep frustrations that even to this day I mostly try and treat them as something I've learned from, but around 1989, I met a friend, a musician named Sanford Ponder, who came on the first California Guitarcraft courses that we did. I think he was there for the birth of this piece called The Breathing Field on the first California course, and then maybe around 1989, I think he came to see this famous show on December 7th, 1989, where a 7-piece League of Crafted Guitarists had done this BOGO tour across the country, booked by ourselves. It's where we met Mike Keneally for the first time, where Mike was busking on a sidewalk in San Diego. And we didn't really know much about him or who he was, but then he came to see us play a couple times somewhere in LA. So we built this kind of friendship with Mike Keneally. But around that time, Sanford Ponder showed up, and I knew there was something going on with him. He seemed super musical, hyper intense, like laser-like attention. And he just seemed to have kind of a funny brilliance about him. So we exchanged some kind of contact info, and I didn't really know much at the time, but I think it was about a year later, maybe 1990 or 1991, somehow we got in touch, and he suggested that we do something together, like collaborate on something. And so we started collaborating probably around, I think it was 91 or 92, I've kind of lost track, but we had these really intense songwriting sessions, and we started putting together this band essentially and writing these songs. And we spent some time in LA. He lived in this big loft in LA, and I would fly there, sometimes weeks at a time, sometimes months at a time, and just rehearse, play, write, and occasionally bring in guests to kind of flesh out and see who else might be part of this band. Or and so there's a long Pat Mastelotto story that happens before this, but I'd been in touch with Pat a little bit, who also came and somehow got in touch through one of the shows we did, maybe even that Whiskey a Go-Go show. Pat probably knows exactly, probably that December 7th show. So anyway, somehow Pat had called, and I think Mr. was just about to either break up, or I think he called me one time when I was staying at Trey Gunn's house in New York City or something, and said, Mister's trying to revive itself, when are you coming to LA next or something? So I got together with him on one of these trips with Sanford and invited him over to meet Sanford, and I think we played together a couple times. And the Mr. band thing fell apart, but then Pat kind of became part of this project that eventually evolved into Prometheus, which was this band where Nigel Gavin, an amazing keyboard player named Chris Ryan, who was a friend of Sanford's, and there was about 5 of us, with some special guests occasionally, who just started writing and then eventually recording what became this Prometheus album. And that was a peak experience, like writing this incredible music, recording it. Sanford had, access to these 2-inch tape machines. And Sanford was putting all his money into just recording and trying to build a catalog of music, of incredible music. And he was working also at Sony Pictures at the time doing sound design. He was like a pretty famous sound designer. He even won an Oscar for sound design for this, Francis Ford Coppola movie. But it was like a peak experience musically. But personally, it was always just really hard. I'd have to fly in and I'd be there for a long time. And there's a lot of things that made it really hard about commuting to LA. And so I had these peak musical experiences. And I'll mention one other. Sanford had seen this folk singer come in and playing in Santa Monica. And he wanted to actually record and produce this folk singer he saw just playing in the street. And she lived in Boston, where I was still at the time. So I went and met her, and I spent a lot of hours just trying to work with her, help her get ready to record, and seeing if she wanted to go work on her first album with Sanford in LA. So we invested a lot of time and energy in this, helping this singer-songwriter get ready to record. And we flew her to LA, spent a ton of money recording her first real official recording project. She was learning how to record. I was trying to coach her on playing with a metronome so she could kind of play in time. Even Pat Mastelotto came in and played on a couple of tracks. And the musical part of it was super exciting, but business-wise and financially, and the struggles of doing this while broke, barely staying alive, was just so hard especially in those early days. I had no steady employment, so I was broke and hand to mouth, and just trying to get by each month, working just enough to save just enough to keep these projects moving. And in the end, probably by about 1994, the Prometheus album was completed and done, but there was no entity besides me there to market, sell, promote, or do anything with it at all. And so there was kind of this peak musical experience combined with this crappy business experience that was a great lesson kind of in what not to do. And the whole folk singer thing also felt like it didn't really go anywhere. And we delivered a bunch of music to this folk singer exactly how she wanted it, in the format she wanted, but I think she, in the end, didn't really like the recording, or something happened and it just didn't go anywhere. So I felt like probably by the end of 94, I was just, kind of super happy with the music, super stuck with the music business part of keeping these things alive. And so I mostly then went to Argentina and joined Los Gauchos Alemanes and was in a trio with Fernie and Ernie for a couple of years with another set of deep investments. But it was a different country, and it was there's a lot of, again, excitements going on in writing and recording, and just being in a different part of the world was re-energizing.
Sounds like a big story.
Yeah, and there's disappointments in almost every aspect of every little corner of, the progressions of these collaborations. And
Yeah.
I think it's just normal for most human interactions.
And how do you manage the human interactions?
Not very well, but I mean, one thing you probably notice when I do something in the foreground, I like go all in. I give it everything, full time, total attention. And that means when a certain project has that full time attention, the other projects kind of starve. So I haven't found really a way to load balance very well, because it can be hard to have multiple things going on at the same time, and trying to give just enough energy to multiple things to keep them growing and going is like juggling. There's a
Yes. Definitely.
act of juggling that feels like it's part of what I've learned how to do over the years as well. Uh-oh, speaking of juggling, oh, here's Sophie. You going to bed?
Hi, Sophie.
Okay.
Hi.
Okay.
Bye.
Say goodnight, Octavio. Okay. See you. Smooch. So yeah, it's tricky. Even I would say to this day, I've kind of learned that not to get stuck on when something seems incredible, not to get too stuck or too attached to it. And when something seems like it's going horribly and like, oh, this is terrible and I feel horrible, not to get too stuck on that too, because everything seems to just go in these cycles.
It's like balance, right? It's like when you are on the high peak, it's mostly of the time going down after that.
Oh.
Yeah, it's kind of difficult. I have found that also.
Yeah. Yeah. One thing I've learned over the years, though, it really helps to have a skill. Like, I've got a really strong engineering background and entrepreneurial background, and I can earn a living pretty easily. So I found it really useful to be able to make money doing a job and doing things people need, while also continuing to intensely, build collaborations and projects. And I've never stopped, never really even taken a break from that. And so the good news about that is all of the engineering work motivates, desire to practice, and these two balance each other really well, so that when I get tired of this part of my brain working, I shift over, and that means every day, like even in these microscopic slices of every day, it helps to have balance, to be able to bounce back and forth between these two worlds.
And when you are like really, really overwhelmed, like in a really bad situation, how do you manage that?
You mean like right now? You mean like most of the time? The way I manage it is seriously by practicing, and I do a lot of hot yoga. So it might sound really cliche, but I really treat practice like a form of meditation, and something, even if I feel like crap or it's been a horrible day or it's been a great day, coming back every day and touching this instrument and just working these muscles is just like a constant that's been there since about 1986. Kind of an intense form of focused, continuous growth, practice, investment, and it's just like meeting a friend. That and having a puppy dog.
That's true.
One of the things we learn in yoga too, hot yoga, it's mostly about becoming comfortable with being a little bit uncomfortable, like pushing right up to your edge, every day, and letting it be okay. Oh, this is uncomfortable. right now, and just observing that and letting it be okay, breathing and letting go, and realizing that soon it will shift and it'll be uncomfortable in a different way.
Mm. That's nice.
Yeah. I'm not sure. Do you do how would you answer that question yourself, Octavio? How do you, knowing what I know, when things get uncomfortable or difficult, or how do you manage? What do you do?
Well, for me, it's kind of difficult, honestly.
Hmm.
It's been like failing a lot and testing a lot.
Hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because as I understand, it's like trying to be comprehensive with your body
Hmm.
for me. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes I think that I cross far beyond the line, and that's when bad things happen.
Hmm.
That's like the not smart moment, like crossing too much. So
Hmm.
I've been finding myself a different approach for me.
Hmm.
Most of musicians that I've been talking lately, they told me like I like to keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going, and that's really cool. It really works. I have worked with that, and it's really cool because when you keep going, something keep going happening, and
Mm-hmm.
it works. But suddenly I start to find that if I stop for a moment, it will be like the best choice for me,
Hmm.
because if I keep going, it's like practice with a bad, technique. It's
Yeah.
like
You can hurt
growing.
yourself.
Yes, you can hurt yourself. For me, it
Hmm.
has been like finding what is wrong with me in this
Hmm.
moment. Like, for example, I've been finding lately about the blocks when I try to compose.
Hmm.
It's been quite interesting job,
Hmm.
because I found myself speaking with myself from the career,
Mm-hmm.
the guy who has been told you need to be an enough musician in this world and you need to solve everything,
Hmm.
that side. And also I found myself with the guitar craft part also,
Hmm.
that no, you need to practice like this, be careful, focus,
Hmm.
all that stuff.
Hmm.
So I've been finding a lot of things in my mind that came in immediately when
Hmm.
I sit down with myself and try to compose.
Hmm.
So for me, it has been really useful to stop,
Hmm.
like not keep going in the same way.
Mm-hmm.
Keep going, but trying to approach in new ways,
Mm-hmm.
because it mostly of the time when I try to approach in the same way, it gets me in the same way. Like I
Hmm.
am going to put you an example. When I was on the school, when I
Hmm.
try to improvise,
Mm-hmm.
that theme is really complex for me, because the first time I tried to improvise, I sucked. The second time was the same, and when I was finished the career, I sucked.
Hmm.
It was the same thing, but I was keep going,
Hmm.
and I was keep working, and I was keep trying, and I was keep learning new stuff, and I was
Mm-hmm.
completing myself with a lot of information.
Hmm.
But I never realized what the problem was on that moment, or
Hmm.
which problem was on that moment, until I found myself that the problem was that I was not hearing. I
Hmm.
was a deaf guy who finished the career playing a lot of notes but couldn't hear really.
Hmm. Yeah.
So for me, it has been really useful sometimes to stop, to
Hmm.
give some time to myself and learn from it,
Hmm.
and don't like hurt myself,
Hmm.
but in another way. Instead of talking like technique way, I
Mm-hmm.
am talking more like hurting myself, thinking that I need to keep going, keep going, keep going in
Hmm.
that way, and don't reach anything,
Hmm.
and get depressed about that.
Hmm.
You know that sometimes happens a lot. Like
Mm-hmm.
I am trying, I am trying, I am trying, and I cannot reach that. It's
Mm-hmm.
it feels like hell sometimes. It's like,
Hmm.
why am I doing that this, and why I am keep going with this, and why is this not working
Hmm.
if it's supposed to work? And some people work all his life like that,
Hmm.
and they died trying to reach something without realize what the real problem was.
Hmm.
I have heard some stories, but it, it can work many. I have found that many musicians can work in many ways. It's
Hmm.
not only like only a point of view. Like,
Yeah.
yes, you need to keep working all the time.
Hmm.
That is like the typical point of view of the musician. Mostly of
Hmm.
my teachers, or mostly of people that I know that
Hmm.
are really good musicians,
Mm-hmm.
they have told me you need to keep going, and it's
Hmm.
a great advice. For myself, I think it's a great advice. But I also have found a balance, like you say, like when you have these peaks,
Hmm.
stopping myself,
Hmm.
like saying you need to rest.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like, I think it's kind of like a philosophy of the Wing Chun, the
Mm-hmm.
martial arts.
Mm-hmm.
There is a story of Bruce Lee when he was like practice a lot this punch, and he couldn't like do it right,
Hmm.
and suddenly Ip Man, who was his teacher, told
Hmm.
him like, you know what? Stop. Go to your house, rest for a
Hmm.
week, don't practice, don't do anything.
Hmm.
And he was like really like, what? What? What is going on? He was like really really confused about that.
Hmm.
And he get this week resting,
Hmm.
and when he came back to practice the same punch, he nailed it.
Hmm.
And then after that he said this thing that is really famous of him, that is like be water, be like
Hmm.
water,
Mm-hmm.
shapeless, take
Mm-hmm.
form, all of that stuff. That
Yeah.
philosophy came from that week of resting.
Hmm.
Or I
Yeah.
think it was a few days, I don't remember how much, but
Hmm.
that also had a big impact on me. It was like
Mm-hmm.
I maybe sometimes need to stop because I am trying to do something so much and
Hmm.
I am not achieving it,
Hmm.
that maybe I need to stop. But it's kind of
Hmm.
difficult.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of hard to stop when you are a guy who like to keep going.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of difficult to understand when your body say, let's have some rest and
Hmm.
see if the time can work on the
Hmm.
thing that is not like keep going.
Hmm. Well, there is, I think, some danger, or maybe that's too strong a word, but I think there can be some dead ends in the idea that the way to success is just practice 10 hours a day, because in a way that can be misunderstood as an instruction to just repeat something for 10 hours a day. And although there's some value in doing that occasionally,
Yes.
there's also so many analogies about what music actually is. And one that I have held for many years, or the way I think about it, is that music is more like a conversation. It's more like this conversation between the two of us. And the meaning of what we're doing, the meaning of the music, the meaning of what we're playing is just like the words we're choosing now.
Yes.
And we could have a meaningful conversation, or we could just spew out a bunch of random black dog dang dog syllables for like 8 hours super fast, where there's nothing actually in the meaning of what those notes are.
Yes.
And so I remember, I think it was my roommate in the late 90s, mid 90s, Chris Murphy, um, who first introduced me to Arvo Part,
Hmm.
the composer. There's a famous video of Arvo Part and Björk in some kind of workshop scenario, and Arvo Part is playing this super slow, intense melody. And he's
Yes.
not playing, 132 beats per minute and some crazy thing all over. It's like 7 notes, and those notes make you want to weep.
Hmm.
And so there's a whole different way of even thinking about if I'm going to practice for 10 hours a day, maybe thinking about practice differently as well. Like part of practice might mean going to listen or just silently listening to whatever is happening and resting and making room for the next right conversation to happen and learning less about, oh, I've got to, build my tongue muscles like, I'm going to become a great speaker. Here's how I'll do it. I'm going to do tongue exercises to become a great speaker.
You will be the next Catman.
Yeah, hopefully. But there's a whole separate process of understanding what music actually is and the meaning and the notes you choose and how to improvise and how to compose. I think of how to compose is not a question of composition. It's behind it is why.
Yeah.
And the what usually comes from why, and often trying to compose can be the worst thing in the world. In a way, a simple way to have something creative show up is just do one thing slowly for as long as you can stand it.
Mm.
And another secret, that I've used since the early days of guitarcraft is do it with someone else and take turns diverging from somebody doing something constant or simple. And generally, there's this old idea about creativity that nature abhors a vacuum. And if you create a string, a big space, almost like drawing a blank page, something will arrive and make itself known if you create the canvas or you create the space. And don't push too hard. Don't try to go somewhere. Don't like be clever and find a bunch of stuff, but just make the space. And generally, something will arrive that maybe even has its own, I don't know, energy, theme, purpose,
Voice. Yes.
voice. Yeah. So anyway, that's been my approach for years, even in the early days of guitarcraft. And there are all these level 2 pieces flying around, and the breathing field began out of the need to just slow down. There were all these beginners, this California course, all these beginners, and revive the world, 120 BPM with all this like super fast release oriented stuff. And people in the room are like, I just want to play a note.
Yeah.
Like, can I just play a note? So there are many ways to practice. Most of the effective ones don't involve playing Fracture for 10 hours a day.
Don't remember that, please. Don't make me remember that.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Might be a sore subject. Too soon? Oops, sorry.
Yeah, it's cool. It's kind of cool. Anyway,
I hope this is useful anyway for you, Octavio, to at least explore or exchange ideas about
this
how to be
this
musical.
this is not only for me. I would like to share this with all the people. So if someone listen to this and say like, "Oh my God, this is true," or maybe one thing of this conversation could help any musician that it's outside, it will be
Hmm.
enough for me.
Hmm.
So we struggle a lot. I have even talked with. I hopefully can have another talk with Daniel Gotardo and Gretchen Mann, and I have really cool talk with them.
Hmm.
And the stuff that they told me is like, oh my God, I feel the same way. They are amazing musicians. They play in a such amazing way, but
Hmm.
they felt the same way that I do.
Hmm.
When I sit with my guitar, they feel the same way.
Hmm.
It's kind
You
of
mean
amazing.
depressed frustrated. It's hard. It's always hard. Every
Yes.
day it's hard.
Yeah, that sometimes you struggle in how to deal
Yeah.
with that,
Yeah.
and you see maybe famous musicians and you see their perspective of the world, and it also helps you. You know,
Hmm.
Daniel met this guy Jason Becker,
Hmm.
and he told me that it was like really cool experience for him, like
Hmm.
really a live experience. So I don't know it if it this works helping someone. It my my job is done here.
Hmm.
And for me it's really useful. I like to talk with my friends musician like you and all the people that it's around me, and
Hmm.
probably I will interview later. So
Awesome.
this is great. Even when my English suck, this is great.
Well, hopefully, well, I'll just say it this way. I get energy knowing that I'm not alone in feeling depressed or feeling stuck or feeling hard. And even when I practice late at night, which generally my time to practice is after 11 p.m., 11 to 12, 12 to 1, as you know from our adventures over the summer, it really helps me to know that I'm not alone and that it's not just that I'm not alone, but I'm not alone. Everyone has an edge, everyone has a limit, everyone has some piece of barrier or boundary that they're working on. And it just helps me to know, I can take a deep breath and realize you are also sitting there in Mexico City, feeling the same and working toward the similar goal. And for me, the goal is be available, keep limber, keep stretching, keep growing to stay connected so that if a phone call happens and Brad says, come over to Jaxie's house tomorrow because Daniel's here and we're working every Sunday, that I'm connected and available and can go contribute something. And even though I don't know anything about it, it helps me to know that I'm not alone and that we're all keeping going together,
Yes.
even from far away.
Thank you for those nice words, Steve. And thank you for have some times because you I know that you are the most busy man besides Robert that I know.
Hmm.
So thank you so much.
My pleasure, Octavio. I've been a fan of yours since we met a million years ago on some guitar craft course, and
Yes.
I'm appreciative of your ongoing commitment and energy through ups and downs, thick and thin. And I know you also work intensely to challenge yourself and to bring people together to be musical. So I'm
Yes, it's
in
been
awe of that.
6 years. We met in 2015, October 2015.
Seems like yesterday and a hundred
Yes.
thousand years ago.
Yes. Well,
All right.
thank you so much, and hope to see you soon.
Yeah, 2022. Let's find a way.
Yes.
All right. Wishing you all well. Hope you all have a good night. Stay in touch in any way that's needed. And just remember when you're sitting there depressed and alone and stuck and I'm horrible and the self-esteem is in the toilet and this is horrible. Just remember you're not alone in that feeling and it's also not true.
Thanks for watching, listening, and getting so far. Also, a big thanks to my dear friend Steve for his unstoppable knowledge, friendship, and music. Also, a big thanks to Sofie for being there. If you like this video and want to support me or my channel, I leave you a link on the description so you can make some donation. If you also want to help me, please give a like or share it. On the next chapter, I will have my dear friend Lucius Gregory Meredith to talk about music, his amazing skills and mind, and his new release of The Crown. So stay tuned and see you soon.